seminar in SSK Global Marxism Online Talks. I am Jeong, a researcher of the SSK Research Cluster at JNU. Today, Professor Hideto Akashi at Komazawa University in Tokyo will give a presentation on digital competition and Marx theory of surplus profit. The presentation time will be 1 hour, followed by 30 minutes of floor discussion. Professor Akashi, please let us hear your talk.
Thank you for introduction. I show you my PowerPoint. Just a moment. Okay. I'm Hideto Akashi. I'm very honored to speak at SSK online talk again. And I'm very glad to see you again. And today I would like to talk about digital competition and Marx theory of surplus profit. But to be honest, I'm not yet familiar with digital competition or platform business. This is just my first step to follow SSK's great project that is post-capitalism and the innovation of Marxism, future for East Asia in the global context. I chose this theme to follow this SSK's project. I would like to talk about essence of my talk at SSK first round and second round and digital competition. And I mentioned Marx's manuscript in 1878. And I introduced Nick Srunichek's book, Platform Capitalism. After that, I mentioned Marx's argument about mercantile capital and ground rent in order to investigate the platform capitalism or digital competition. I use the Capital Volume 3, translated by Fred Mosley and Ben Fawkes into English. First, I want to summarize the essence of my talk at first round and second round. The most important factor of the law of tendential fall of the general rate of profit is that the rate of profit falls and the quantity of profit increases at the same time, while the organic composition is rising under the pressure of competition. These factors generate some counteracting factors, but the latter cannot diminish the former. In his 1867-1868 manuscripts, Marx tried to integrate the effect of turnover into his argument for the rate of profit. He had not finished this project. Marx still mentioned the law in 1870s. He wanted to elaborate it by including the effect of turnover. Michael Heinrich said Marx abandoned his own law in 1870s, but I criticize his interpretations just a little bit. And in the current competition among capitals, their organic compositions becomes higher and their turnover time must be shortened as much as possible. Today, I would like to talk about current digital competition by using Marx's theory of surplus profit. This is about average profit and monopoly. Digital competition. I want to use the argument made by Mr. Kusumano, Michael Kusumano. He is a professor of Massachusetts Institute of Technology, School of Management. And probably he is not left intellectual, but he is an expert of platform business. He said, understanding the business of platforms begins with the drivers of platform markets in general and digital competitions more specifically. It's a potential for generating strong network effects, limiting multi-homing. Multi-homing means that the people use not only one platform, but also some platforms when they enjoy shopping or they are in business. And restricting differentiated and niche competition and building high barriers to entry. This concept of barriers to entry is very important for me. And he said, in a winner-take-all or most world, where network effects drive industry concentration around a small number of dominant players, platform companies have many opportunities to exercise market power, harm consumer welfare, hurt local or global competitors, and extract monopoly or quasi-monopoly rents. This monopoly or quasi-monopoly rents being so-called overcharge, that is license fees, administration fee, patent fee, and revenue share, etc., which is transformed into rent. Xmat said, unlike in the traditional economy, where companies require expensive physical investments to build out the business model, in the digital world, companies can grow rapidly with the clever use of data, software, and platform strategy. This means that the investment on the fixed capital is relatively small, but the organic composition of platform company is very high. This factor means that companies can increase the rate of profit by using data. However, digital competition is developing with outsourcing of production process to global south, as well as financialization in global north. According to John Smith, he is a scholar of UK, he said, outsourcing has fueled financialization. Transnational corporations are seeking to cut production costs by outsourcing of production process to low-wage countries. The rising prices of financial assets that characterize financialization reflects the greatly expanded super exploitation of living labor in the global south. This is very important. We should discuss digital competition or platform capitalism on the basis of value theory. How can we use Marx theory? Platform companies' profit rate is much higher than the general rate of profit. Of course, we should take account of the difference between the Marx calculation of profit rate and the calculation in the today's business. For example, in today's businesses, we calculate the ratio of operating income to net sales. This is the most popular indicator in order to calculate profit rate for today's capitalists. How can we analyze its high profit rate by using Marx's theory? His explanations on monopoly, surplus profit, investment in fixed capital, and so on seem to be helpful. If we try to apply Marx's theory to current platform capitalism, we need some logical mediations. I want to ask you, what is the most essential factor of platform capitalism or digital capitalism? In my opinion, we should firstly pay attention to the monopoly in mercantile capital. Next, we should deal with ground rent in agricultural sector. In this presentation, I would like to concentrate on the description of absolute rent in the context of capital transfer. I think we should investigate not only absolute rent but also differential rent, and I'm not yet sure which is better between differential rent and absolute rent in order to investigate platform capitalism. But today, I want to focus on absolute rent. I want to introduce Marx's manuscript in 1878 to you. Marx wrote a short manuscript in 1878, which is titled "On the Rate of Profit, Turnover of Capital, Interest and Discount" by editors of Mega. Marx wrote, "In the case of branch of businesses which form natural monopolies, natürliche Monopole in German, in the capitalist economy, this is proved. This means the existence of natural monopoly is proved by the fact that their rate of profit does not at all enter the same division. That is, a surplus profit is left hanging on the fingers." The definition of natural monopoly is not so clear, but my colleague Ryuji Sasaki taught me that this concept of natural monopoly came from John's shared mill. I appreciate it. And here, the same division means the equalization of the rate of profit through capital transfer among industrial sectors. Marx said, here are now two possibilities. Either this monopoly is only temporary and fragile by development of capital investments in above mentioned businesses that is related to natural monopoly. For example, railway industries. Thus, by the usual capitalist competition, natural monopoly will disappear by the usual capitalist competition. Then the surplus profit does not fix itself to the rent. This surplus profit will be temporary. Another possibility, or the opposite case, then the surplus profit fixes itself to the rent, which, however, again is subject to big changes in its quantity, for example, the ground rent. Marx analyzed natural monopolies, which can lead to the temporary surplus profit or fixed rent. I think this description is very important when we analyze platform companies. I prepared appendix regarding railway industry. By the way, let's see platform capitalism analyzed by Nick Srunicek. He shows 5 types of platforms. Number 1, advertising platforms, which extract information on users, undertake a labor of analysis, and then use the products of that process to sell ad space. For example, Google or Facebook. Number 2, cloud platforms, which own the hardware and software of digital dependent businesses and are renting them out as needed. For example, AWS, this means Amazon Web Service, Salesforce. I don't know exactly Salesforce. Srunicek indicated this one. Number 3, industrial platforms, which build the hardware and software necessary to transform traditional manufacturing into internet-connected processes that lower the cost of production and transform goods into services, GE or Siemens. Number 4, product platforms, which generate revenue by using other platforms to transform a traditional good, for example, music CD, into service, and by collecting rent or subscription fees on them, Rolls-Royce, Spotify. Number 5, lean platforms, which attempt to reduce their ownership of assets to a minimum and to profit by reducing costs as much as possible. Uber and Airbnb. I have never used these services. In fact, many platforms have a mixed character of these 5 types. So platforms seem to be very complicated. For example, Apple has some platform elements to its business. For example, iTunes, the App Store. I've never used Apple device or service, but these only generate 8% of the revenues. It is primarily a producer with now standard practices of outsourcing manufacturing. This is so-called fabless strategy. The vast majority, 68% of revenues, come from iPhone sales. In my opinion, Apple has a parasitic character because its profit depends on outsourcing, in broader meaning, of production process and platform elements. What is the most essential factor of platform capitalism? Srunicek says himself as follows: at the most general level, platforms are digital infrastructures that enable 2 or more groups to interact. They therefore position themselves as intermediaries that bring together different users, that is, customers, advertisers, service providers, producers, suppliers, and physical objects. In this meaning, at the most general level, platforms belong to the factor of mercantile capital in the context of Marx theory. I want to deal with type 1 advertising platforms and second, cloud platforms just a little bit before investigating Marx theory. In short, advertising platforms. With advertising platforms in particular, revenue is generated through extraction of data from users' activities online, from analysis of those data and from the auctioning of ad space to advertisers. He showed interesting topics about the two questions. Are data produced by unwaged laborers, or are they raw material? If you are interested in these topics, please see appendix. Data extraction is becoming a key method of building a monopolistic platform and of siphoning off revenue from advertisers. But what are advertising platforms doing with their revenues? Their investment in fixed capital is relatively low, and they use a lot of money to make M&A. According to Surnicek, investment levels remain low in US, UK, and Germany, so there has been little growth in fixed capital. Instead, these companies have tended to save their cash to use for mergers and acquisitions and to funnel their money into tech startups. I cannot deal with Marx theory of credit in this presentation. However, I want to emphasize that the profits realized by the non-productive sectors are derived from surplus value extracted by value-producing living labor, especially in Global South, written by John Smith, his excellent work. Next, cloud platforms. Cloud platforms are connected to production process, but in my opinion, cloud platforms themselves cannot produce value. Surnicek said, in effect, Amazon Web Services rents out cloud computing services, which include on-demand services, storage, and computing power, software development tools, and operating systems, and ready-made applications. The utility of this practice for other businesses is that they do not need to spend the time and money to build up their own hardware system, their own software development kit, or their own applications. Cloud platforms ultimately enable the outsourcing of much of a company's information technology department. Many companies can save money and time by using cloud platforms. AWS profit. Amazon Web Service is now the most rapidly growing part of Amazon, and also the most profitable, with up about 30% margins, very high margins, and nearly $8 billion in revenue in 2015. In the first quarter of 2016, AWS generated more profit for Amazon than its core retail service. Industry capital can or may save circulation costs and time by using AWS, but it must pay margins, 30%. Platform essentially functions as a massive tool of mercantile capital. But this 30% margins may be regarded as fixed rent. Let's see Capital Volume 3, Chapter 4, Mercantile Capital. According to Marx, mercantile capital does not produce surplus value by itself. This is a basic viewpoint. However, it can extract surplus value from productive capital by making the turnover of capital more efficient and take secondarily part in forming the general rate of profit. Marx said, thus, mercantile capital is involved in the equalization of surplus value that forms average profit. Therefore, even though it is not involved in the production of that surplus value, the average rate of profit, therefore, already takes account of the deduction from surplus value, which falls to mercantile capital. In other words, the merchant's deduction from the profit of productive capital. This concept of deduction from the profit of productive capital is very important. Marx wrote, taking commercial capital as a whole in relation to industrial capital, a single turnover of commercial capital can correspond not only to the turnovers of several capitals in one sphere of production, but also to the turnover of number of capitals in different spheres. Here, commercial capital is equal to mercantile capital. This sentence reminds us of marketplace as a kind of platform which can speed up the turnover of productive capital. According to Marx, mercantile capital thus creates neither value nor surplus value, at least not directly, insofar as it contributes towards shortening the circulation time. It can indirectly help the productive capitalist increase the surplus value he produces. If mercantile capital forms monopoly, it will be able to extract more surplus value from the productive capitalists by buying products at lower price from productive capital. About the monopoly in the mercantile capital, according to Marx, the capital of A invested in the same branch as B may make more or less than the average number of turnovers. In this case, the others may make less or more. That is opposite case, opposite pattern. This in no way affects the turnover of the total mass of mercantile capital invested in this branch, but it is of decisive importance for the individual merchant or retailer. In such a case, he makes a surplus profit, emphasized by Marx, just as industrial capitalists make surplus profit if he produces under more favorable conditions than the average conditions. If competition compels it, he can sell more cheaply than his friend of commerce or mercantile brother without reducing his profit below the average, etc. Marx said, if the conditions that enable him to have a quicker turnover can themselves be purchased, as for example, the location, of his sales outlets. He may pay extra rent for this. In other words, a part of his surplus profit may be transformed into rent. We can find here the rent paid to the owner which occupies advantageous location. If this kind of rent can be applicable to the one which is paid to platform, platform company itself as mercantile capital owns a location, that is platform, which generates rent. To say exactly, which transfer the surplus profit into the rent. Next, let's see the description of absolute rent. Platform capitalism does not mean monopoly of particular advantageous conditions of production, which are brought about by natural power or resource. In short, platform is not a natural condition. A platform should be a common infrastructure that can be improved and extended by various artificial methods. However, a platform company's monopoly raises a barrier which makes it possible to extract rent from users and reduce competition with other capitals, or prevent competition with other capitals. I would like to regard one of logical aspects of absolute rent as an explanation of the least barrier built or raised by landowners, which consequently blocks capital transfer from other industrial sectors. I think that for capitalists, the barrier as a rent or a rent as the barrier to entry is taken as given, at least in the contract with landowner. They have to decide whether or not they invest on the poorest land, the worst land, by expecting the difference between the entire part of surplus value and the average profit. They sometimes get less profit than average profit because this difference is smaller than they expected. Let's see main manuscript of Capital Volume 3, Chapter 6, the transformation of surplus profit into ground rent. Here, let's focus on absolute rent. According to Marx, landed property presupposes that certain persons enjoy the monopoly of disposing of particular portions of the globe as exclusive spheres of their private will to the exclusion of all others. This landed represents nothing but a certain money tax that his monopoly permits him to extract from the industrial capitalists, the farmer, that is agricultural capitalist. In German, it's called Pächter. Since by our assumption, landed property does not bring anything without being leased, unleased land being economically worthless. A small rise in the market price above the price of production is sufficient to bring new land of the best kind onto the market. These are basic presupposition. Here, let's see a genuine monopoly price. For example, the price of high-ranking wine. Marx wrote, a genuine monopoly price, which is determined neither by the price of production of the commodities nor by their value, rather by the demand of the purchaser and their ability to pay. consideration of which, therefore, belongs to the theory of competition, or where the actual movement of market prices is investigated. Or Marx wrote, a vineyard, for example, bears a monopoly price if it produces wine which is of quite exceptional quality but can be produced only in relatively small quantities. We can basically ignore this genuine monopoly price when we analyze platform capital. A platform is not special commodities whose sale simply depends on desire and ability of buyer. This is quite different of monopoly regarding platform capitalism. Surplus profit from barriers to entry. This will result in absolute rent. According to Marx, if capital comes up against an alien power, this is land ownership, which it can overcome only partly or not at all, a power which restricts its investment in particular spheres of production, that is, agricultural sector, allowing this only under conditions that completely or partially excludes the above-mentioned general equalization of surplus value to give an average profit. Capital transfer from the industrial sector in which the organic composition is high to the other sectors in which the organic composition is low. The profit rate will equalize through these capital transfers between industrial sectors. And it is clear that in these spheres of production, a surplus profit will arise from the excess of commodity value above its price of production, which is transformed into rent. Because of barrier or alien power, capital transfer is prevented. And it is as an alien power and a barrier of this kind that landed property confronts capital over its investment in the land, or that landowner confronts the capitalist. That is barrier to entry for capital investment. Here, landed property is a barrier that does not permit any new capital investment on formerly uncultivated or unleased without levying a toll, i.e. demanding a rent. But as a result of the barrier that landed property sets up, the market price must rise to a point at which the land can pay a surplus over the price of production, i.e. a rent. In other words, the equalization of profit rate will be interrupted because of the barrier to entry. That's why the payment of rent will occur. According to Marx, whether the rent is equal to the full difference between the value and the price of production, or only to a greater or lesser part of difference, depends entirely on the state of supply in relation to demand and on the extent of the area newly brought into cultivation. Equalization of profit rate and absolute rent. As long as the rent is not equal to the excess of the value of the agricultural products over their price of production, one part of this surplus always goes into the general equalization and the proportionate distribution of all the surplus value among the various individual capitals. It seems to be a little complicated, but regarding agricultural sectors, equalization will stop at one point because of barrier to entry. As soon as the rent is equal to the excess of the value over the price of production, this entire part of the extra surplus value, the excess of surplus value over and above the part of surplus value measured in line with average profit, would be withdrawn from the process of equalization and proportionate distribution. From the theoretical viewpoint, equalization relating to agricultural sector stops at the point where all the excess of surplus value over the average profit is withdrawn as absolute rent. However, the barrier to entry is not always stable because the organic composition of agriculture sector will be able to change as well as industrial sector. This barrier to entry is unstable. According to Marx, if the average composition of agricultural capital was the same as that of the average social capital or even higher, the result would be the disappearance of absolute rent in the sense developed above. Absolute rent may disappear. It depends on the historical change of the organic composition of agriculture and industrial sectors. Quotation. It is assumed in this connection that agriculture sets more labor in motion than any equally large portion of non-agricultural capital. The extent of this gap, or whether it exists at all, depends on the relative development of agriculture and industry. By the nature of the case, this difference between agriculture and industry must decline with the progress of agriculture, unless the ratio in which the variable part of the capital declines vis-a-vis the constant part is still greater in industrial capital than in agriculture. In other words, if organic composition of agriculture increases as much as manufacturing industry, absolute rent will disappear. This process means that the basis of one part of surplus profit with barrier to entry will also disappear. This means absolute rent will disappear. Historical development of organic composition in agriculture and industry will affect the forming of the general rate of profit, which continues to fall. In this meaning, the barrier to entry is not stable, and the law of tendential fall of profit rate is acceptable, in my opinion. Platform capital has difficulties of succeeding. At the end of my presentation, I mentioned these difficulties of platform capitalism. Xuman makes a list of 209 failed platforms and focuses on 4 common mistakes that lead platforms to fail as business. Number 1, mispricing on one side of the market for users, for consumers, or for business, and so on. Anyway, mispricing is frequent. Number two, failure to develop trust with users and partners. Number three, prematurely dismissing the competition. He mentioned the competition between Internet Explorer by Microsoft and Google Chrome. Number four, entering too late, that is, after a market with very strong network effects and other conditions amenable to a winner-take-all or most outcome has tipped. Timing and pricing are so difficult that even early winners can quickly become losers, according to Kusumano. And he said, because platforms often brought a new model and structure to existing businesses, they often run into problems with the legal and regulatory regimes. Now I want to add some factors as follows. Antitrust movement or criticism of artificial monopoly or criticism against tax evasion to tax haven and so on. The problem of privacy and security, endless technology development and competition. New technology is rapidly improving and quickly making a new standard universal, according to Cornish Japanese scholar. And furthermore, it is still important for us to find out the material limitation of digital technology. That is, metal resource, rare metal, difficulty of recycling, child labor in Africa, etc. Conclusion. This is my provisionary conclusion. In my opinion, at the most general level, platforms belong to the factor of mercantile capital in the context of Marx theory. Mercantile capital in Marx meaning does not produce surplus value by itself. However, it can extract surplus value from industrial capital by making the turnover capital more efficient and take secondarily part in forming the general rate of profit. A platform should be a common infrastructure to interact, but it is monopolized by mercantile capital, which depends on outsourcing of production process to the global south. Furthermore, we can apply Marx's theory of absolute rent to platform capitalism. A platform company builds the barrier which makes it possible to extract surplus profit and to block the entry of capital investment regarding platform from other industrial sectors. In 1878, Marx analyzed natural monopolies which can lead to the temporary rent and the fixed rent. I found that Paul Baran and Swiji mentioned these natural monopolies. That was a little similar to Marx's description. For Baran and Swiji's the famous book that is Monopole Capital. Yeah, I think the former case that is the temporary. This is false. Sorry. I read one more time. In 1878, Marx analyzed natural monopolies, which can lead to the temporary surplus profit and fixed rent. I think the former case, temporary surplus profit, is more significant than the latter because of the current digital competition among capitalists. Natural monopolies and surplus profit may disappear sooner or later. If so, the general rate of profit will continue to fall in the long term. And I have still a little time.
That's 5 minutes.
Okay. I want to mention one appendix. Surnichek's interesting topics. Oh, sorry. He asked us, Surnichek, are data produced by unwaged laborers or are data raw material? According to Surnichek, some critical theorists of the web think that users are unwaged laborers who produce goods, data, and content that were then taken and sold by the companies to advertisers and other interested parties. Surnichek does not agree with this perspective. In his opinion, rather than exploiting free labor means when we used platform, Facebook, and so on, we are free labor for platform companies. Rather than exploiting free labor, the position taken here is that advertising platforms appropriate data as a raw material. The activities of users and institutions, if they are recorded and transformed into data, become a raw material that can be refined and used in a variety of ways by platforms. These topics are very controversial. I do not agree with Surnichek regarding a raw material. Data are a raw material. It sounds very strange. Data is nothing but information to interact, in my opinion. Of course, maybe I'm too naive, but I asked you these questions. That's all from me. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for your very interesting and insightful presentation, Professor Akashi. His presentation reminds me of the debate over the value of information commodities, 정보재 가치 논쟁, which began in 2004 in Korea. But at the same time, I think it will help us broaden our understanding of more so-called immaterial and platformized modern capitalism, and we consider the classical Marxist view of it more accurately. If I'm allowed to summarize his talk, to explain the platform sector, which enjoys higher profit rate than other sectors, he shows that platform capitalism can be understood as the capitalism led the capitals like mercantile ones, which dump production process on the global south, do not produce surplus value, but by accelerating capital turnover, receive some of each value and at the same time participate in the formation of general profit rates and monopolize the market. He also says that we can apply Marx theory on the absolute land by the exclusive capitalist land ownership to the platform capitalism, because platform capitals create barriers that prevent capital of other sectors from entering the platform sector easily. Now, anyone who has any question or discussion on this presentation, please raise your hand or let me know via chat. 네, 김종현 선생님.
Thank you for helpful introduction on platform capitalism and its analysis based on your theories on rate of turnover and rate of profit and so on. And I have two or three questions. Some of them are very about simple conceptual questions. Some are very simple conceptual questions, and one is about the information value of information goods, as Dr. Jeong Guhyeon has mentioned. I think these are related topics. So first of all, you said that the value that goes to mercantile capitals distribution is deducted from surplus value, and is it something specific about this sentence, or is it something that Marx applied to all of genuine or pure transaction cost and so on? And my second question is, yes, I think rent extraction would. I agree with that. Rent extraction would consist most parts of the profits platform capitalists would earn. However, as Professor as Dr. Jeong mentioned, he also I think there can be living labor's contribution to the profit earning of the capitalists that employs the developers of platforms, and repeatedly as massive number of people are using those platforms, something that works just like absolute land can be would be consisting most parts of them. However, some specific, I think some, I'm not an expert of technologies, but I think there can be some platforms that might require highly skilled laborers with complexity in work, and their product as copyright can be containing a level of labor values that was extracted through manufacturing process itself. So that was my opinion, but how I want to know about your opinion, and if I get something wrong about this point, I want to hear about your alternative explanations. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. And you said simple conceptual question, but
Well, first
yeah,
one, just first one,
yeah.
yes.
It's very difficult or complicated matters. And what I want to say is very simple. What is the most essential factor of platform or platform capitalism? My answer is the essence is mercantile capital to extract surplus value from industrial sectors. This is too simple, in fact, but the platform has many characters and very complicated. So we must choose the most essential factor. And mercantile capital extracts their profit from the surplus value generated by productive capital. This is a basic point. And by doing so, mercantile capital takes part in the forming general rate of capital. And when we use the theory of absolute rent, this is not enough to investigate the current platform capitalism. And I have already said we should investigate not only absolute rent but also differential rent. And I'm not yet clear how to use the theory of differential rent. But today I focused on the absolute rent because I want to deal with capital transfer among various industrial sectors. And I'm not sure my try has succeeded or not. And you said skilled labor or high-level labor, they develop high technological application or systems or hardware, software, and so on. They may produce high-level quantities, and they produce a lot of values. I agree with you regarding this point. But I want to say, for example, data or software, hardware themselves cannot produce value. Laborers, only laborers produce value or surplus value. And platforms depends on deduction from their surplus value. This is the most basic aspects because we should discuss based on the value theory. I couldn't answer enough for your question, but I want to emphasize what I think the most important factor is for
Thanks. And I also came to similar conclusion after hearing your answer. Very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
네, 정진영 선생님.
지금 그 정구현 박사님 지금 말해도 됩니까?
예, 예, 말씀하시면 됩니다.
제 말 들리군요, 그러면.
예,
Mr. Hideo Akashi, thank you so much. Especially your newly pointed with your research, platform capitalism, and especially you pointed out Marx theory as expressed, mercantile capitalism. Actually, you said mercantile capital, pointing to the platform capitalism especially. So I appreciate that to think about concretely with your research paper proposed today. I have been reading International Labor Organization, ILO's new research paper, even though it is seemingly introductory research paper. I want to tell you very shortly, the title is Platform Labor in Search of Value. It printed out in 2021. Maybe I remember June or September. I cannot remember exactly. Let me quote very briefly one thing. This paper by ILO shows platforms using the plural added S, platforms. They say that, let me read out the first two sentences. Previously regarded as modular technological architectures, platforms today are infrastructures of value creation, value capture, and value distribution. Platforms facilitate interactions among various actors, including consumers, producers, advertisers, service providers, and suppliers. Let me stop here. So my attention, ILO expressed, platforms today are infrastructures of value creation. As you reported today, mercantile capital does not create value. Am I correct? Okay. And also, this ILO paper shows me data. You said the platform using the data, you said it is merely information. Maybe if I'm correct, my understanding is you does not treat value or informational data not treating as value. Data platform is using the data, and then you express is simply information and not value. Now, it's not really my question, but if you did not look into this ILO paper, maybe they some terminology ILO paper describes like a platform economy, platformization, platforms I read already, and also platform and data interoperability. Yes, of course, this ILO paper contains the word platform capitalism, and other ones, one more platform cooperativism. So it is related all interactively described with data. So it's not really a question, but seemingly, even though you pointed out platform capitalism as simply mercantile capital by the theory of Marx. And I read already this ILO paper says infrastructures of data creation, I'm sorry, value creation. So if you later on in the future, you look into this ILO paper, and then maybe you may, I don't think you're against ILO paper, but you may think maybe one more time to compare with your research paper today you presented. My basic intention is really to learn, not arguing with you. I'm a student, so I appreciate your insight. Sorry, too long. If I make you confused, sorry about that. Let me stop here. Thank you one more time.
Thank you very much for very interesting question and important information. And I'm interested in ILO's paper, and I want to read this one later. And I want to say that probably the definition of labor, the definition of value is quite different from Marx's definition. I imagine so. The value in Marx's meaning, the value is produced by labor power, and data or technology or machine cannot produce value by themselves. The value of machine or technology or data is transferred to the commodities. They cannot produce values by themselves. This is the most basic factor in Marx theory. I based on this value theory. That's why infrastructure of value creation. This sounds very strange when we based on Marx value theory. Infrastructure cannot produce value. When infrastructure has a value, because they are produced by labor power. But the value of infrastructure itself can only be transferred to the commodities through the labor. And what I should say. And you mentioned probably two directions of platform. The one is the one is the mechanism of extraction of how can I say? The one is a capitalist tool for valorization. The other direction is cooperationism in the future to interact through the platform. I agree with this point, and I wanted to deal with a platform as an infrastructure for the future world. For example, without advertising, we can see the communication chat, or we can see many information and communication contents without advertising. But now we must face many unuseful advertising, and these advertising interrupts me to read articles or get useful information. It will take a long time to read all the content of important article. We want to use platform without advertising or paying rent. This is possible for us. We want to use platform without capitalism. This is my last conclusion. Sorry, my answer is not enough, but
Okay, thank you so much.
thank you very much.
Yeah, if I have questions later or any other things to learn more from you, do you accept my messages to your email? Are you okay or not?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thank you. And one very quick, it's not a question, just I want to listen to you. The workers working under the corporations of the so-called platform capitalism, the workers, do you think the workers in the platform capitalism, platformization society like today in the world, productive workers or non-productive workers? Platform workers I'm talking about. What do you think?
Yeah, this is very difficult. How can I say?
You don't have to answer. Just I ask your opinion.
Yeah.
So this is I stop here. Whatever you answer. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you very much. In practical capitalism, there are not only productive workers but also unproductive workers in reality. But my argument is very simple to investigate current platform capitalism. I situated the platform capitalism, a platform company, as unproductive. So this is of course too simple, but in today's presentation, I situated the workers of platform companies as unproductive workers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
정선생 선생님, 네, 먼저 하시죠. 네.
Professor Akashi, thank you very much for your very interesting and thought-provoking presentations. I learned it very much. Yeah, I have a short, I have a question. Could you explain your main conclusion by using some numerical examples? Because your presentation is mostly is verbal, so I will appreciate if you could demonstrate your main thesis by using some numerical examples or the algebraic presentation. And because I am a little confused that you explain the surplus profit of platform capital as a somewhat combination of the mercantile profit and the absolute rent. Because as you explained, it's Marxian mercantile or commercial profit is based on the equalization of rate of profit between the industrial capital and commercial capital. But on the contrary, the absolute rent is the result of the obstruction or obstruction of the process of equalization of rate of profit between the industrial sector and the agricultural sector, according to Marx. So, is commercial capital is the result of the equalization of the rate of profit. That is in short, is the result of the competition of many capitals. But absolute rent is the result of the impossibility or the impossibility of the equalization of rate of profit between anyway capitals. So I don't know. So it will be really helpful for us to understand your main thesis if you could use some numerical examples. Maybe, yeah, I am wrong. Because I have missed your paper, so thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. I'm also not an expert of digital technology or platform capitalism, but my provisional conclusion is the character of platform is mixed among two factors you mentioned. That it's one factor is mercantile capital's function, and the other one is absolute rent. It is related to the barriers against the equalization of the rate of profit. I mixed these two factors, and we saw one quotation regarding the monopoly of the mercantile capital. In that paragraph, Marx showed the monopoly of mercantile capital, in which the one mercantile capital can pay rent to the owner, which occupies the advantageous location. And I paid attention to this type of rent, and platform itself owns the advantageous location to the consumers and producers and so on. And platform companies can own itself this advantageous location. That's why we can mix two factors, that is the function of mercantile capital and the factor of absolute rent. Absolute rent is a barrier which prevents the other capital from entering into the developing platform. This is my provisional idea. I'm not yet sure this is right or wrong. Maybe we had better discuss differential rent, which gets more rent according to their quality of land. Yeah, I have to think about ground rent further. But today I focused on absolute rent. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much for your answers. Yeah, I will also think about more. Thank you.
네, 다음 그 김종현 선생님 뭐 좀 더 하실 말씀이 있으시다고.
I'm sorry, I forgot to ask a simple another question. It was about rate of turnover and rate of profits relationship. As you mentioned in earlier works, rate of turnover was largely ignored in many literature. However, it can boost rate of profit to rise, although it is generally have tendency to fall. However, what do you think about I don't know, this can be not easy to specify, but how do you think about platform capital's effects to later profit through changing rate of turnover as it has character of mercantile capital?
Thank you very much. That is also very difficult question.
tricky.
I didn't explain that point. And what I can say is that platform capitalism, platform company has a high rate of profit, much higher than average profit. But this high profit rates
From others.
the high rate of profit comes from the surplus value of other industrial capitals. There is a big limitation because platform's rate of capital means a deduction. This is a limitation. But the platform capital facilitates the turnover of industrial capital. This means counter effect against the law of tendential fall of rate of profit. But I also mentioned the material limit of digital technology. For example, the deficiency of rare metal and so on, or crisis in Europe, or the deficiency of supply of semiconductors and so on. We are facing various problems regarding digital technology. And we must invest on fixed capital to develop new technology, for example, 5G network and electric vehicle and so on. Platform capitalism must compete with each other. I don't get I don't get the beautiful conclusion, not yet, but we must think about the many difficulties or limitations of platform capitalism. Sorry, this is also provisionally.
Well, thank you. That the profit comes from the deduction from others was very essential point, and I missed it. But as you reminded it, it was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We've already used up all the time, but if you don't mind, I would like to ask a question. Is it okay?
Yep.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, your presentation seems to cover a similar topic to the debate over the value of information commodities in Korea. The debate in Korea was about how the value of information goods, such as Microsoft, Windows OS, or like PowerPoint, are determined. At first, the Korean debate centered on the one hand, the argument that the value of information good is a combination of excess surplus value, information rent, and monopoly profit. And the other hand, the counter argument that the value of information good is zero and purely monopoly profit. I think your attempt to view platform capitals as a kind of mercantile capital, while understanding their incomes in the form of an absolute rent is strongly persuasive, but this might lead to a certain issue. Marx discusses the source of three revenues, including profit, wages, and ground rent, along with the three major classes, capitalist, workers, and the landowner. This approach strongly represents Marx's approach that different sources of income can correspond different interests of each class. This is as if in modern capitalism, financial capital has its own form of income, interest. When we say that we consider platform capital as the mercantile capital and at the same time its income as rent, what strengths or weakness do you think your argument can have in terms of connection between the capitalist economic basis and the class analysis?
It's also very difficult. I think platform companies is not only mercantile capital, but also landowner. But it sounds very strange. So my provisionary analysis is that a platform company as a mercantile capital has advantageous location. That's why a mercantile capital functions as a landowner too. But this location can be improved and extended because platform is not natural conditions. So platform companies must face the competition with other capitals. And I agree with the opinion the cost of information or data is nearly zero, and platform capitalism's revenue comes from rent or exploitation from the global south. Yeah, sorry, I cannot answer enough, but it's okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's time to finish our talk. Thank you for your presentation, Professor Akashi, and thank you all. The next talk will be made on March 23rd at same time by Professor Jeong at University of Strasbourg Institute for Advanced Study under the topic of Communist Party or Working Class Party, Marx's two theories of the party. I hope to see you all then. Thank you.